So I'm in the Witherspoons, Norbury, with my teacher, John Fullman.
I joined in 82.
Sylvan High School.
Sylvan High School. And what I didn't know was I trained to teach adults and I couldn't get a job. So I was just applying here, there and everywhere. And I got an interview at Sylvan with Bob Chester. And I seemed to impress him in the interview. And he said, right, well, you start in September. So I spent the summer holiday of my previous job, that's as a driver. I worked for British Road Services, which no longer exists. So I did lots of different contracts on that. I was, driving for things like newsprint coming from Aylesford, and for Cadbury's, and for British Library. You could do, 3 different companies. Anyway, I got there, and what I didn't know was that the previous head of department had retired, hurt. He had a nervous breakdown, and they gave me his timetable, which was a bit unfair. Well, I mean, they gave me a year 7 tutor group, 11-year-olds. I trained to teach adults with it. They gave me all these 11-year-olds. And his teaching timetable, so I was teaching PE, which I hadn't trained to do. I was teaching history and geography to the year 7s, which I hadn't trained to do. I was an English teacher. And your class, which was 40 in year 10, you probably know this, you were the worst class in year 10. And I turned up for this, and there was people like Jason and Dean and Tracy Beaver. And you weren't exactly the easiest people to deal with. The only thing that Chester said to me before I took that first lesson, he said, if you could keep them in the classroom. Some of them have a habit of wandering around the school when they're meant to be. So
I've actually got a letter home.
I was leaning against.
When I climbed out the window, the teacher locked the door and said, "Right, you're not going home. You're all staying behind." And I thought, "Fuck this!"
Yeah.
And climbed out the window. So I got a letter home for that.
So and I was leaning against the door, and about halfway through, most of you twigged I was leaning against the door because you weren't leaving early.
Yeah.
And when it was finished, I went down to Chester, sort of shaking, saying, "Oh, I got through that." And he was saying, and I would go home most nights, not just with you lot. I mean, I was new to teaching kids, so I had 11-year-olds who were more or less the same age as my own children, and I was learning to do that. And every time I went home, my wife would say, "Well, what happened?" And I'd tell her what had happened. And she said, "Well, you need to do this and this and this, and you got to introduce rewards." That's where the sweets came from. And you got, one of the inspectors was very wary of me. In those days, you were a probationer for a year. You weren't a real teacher, you were a probationer for a year. And you had to have 2 inspections. And the first inspector came in, and I was handing out sweets for getting things right. And he complained.
Right, he said, "You look right, whoever can do a page of writing, not an A4 page of writing, like half an A4 page of writing. I've got this," and he had a big bag of fun-sized Mars bars or Sneakers or Twix or whatever they're, marathons they were called in. And he said, "You can have one of these." So of course, everyone started writing any old shit, and just to get something to eat at the end of the day. But yeah, it was a carrot for the.
Well,
for the
this is what my wife said. She said, "You don't work for nothing. It's not bribery. You're working for a wage. Well, then give them a wage. Tell them, do this and you get that." And she said, "Don't frighten them with an A4 size piece of paper. It's too long.
Start off with something manageable."
She said, "Get yourself a load of 5x4 file cards and hand those out. They're not frightening. And then tell them it doesn't matter if they don't punctuate and they can't spell. Doesn't matter. Just write
something.
How you feel, whatever you think you can do." And so, I use that approach. I use that approach all through my teaching. And Sylvan, I was at Sylvan for 8 years. And after 3, I made it to head of year. And after 7, I made it to head of department. And then they sold the school to Lord Harris of Carpet. And being a left-winger, when the incoming deputy head said, left-wing rhetoric is all about mixed ability teaching. I left because that's all I do. I do mixed ability teaching. And she got very upset with me because I said, well, teaching's mixed ability. I'm much better than any of the teachers you got. And you're terrible.
Another thing I remember you saying, like, we were going to do a project, and whoever does the best project would get a £10 record voucher from Beano's Records in Surrey Street. The second prize was a £5 voucher for records in thing. And for me, I was into my music. I was into the mod fashion. I was into scooters, even though I just about got one. And I was going out with this girl called Natalie, who luckily enough, who went to a different school, had done a project on mods. So I did actually copy it out, and I got the £5 voucher.
I can't remember who won.
No, neither can I.
But no, I learned more than the kids I was teaching in my early years at Sylvan. I learned how to manage a class. I learned how to bribe people to get good behaviour. I learned how to frighten certain people.
Skills, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I would just channel my dad if things were going bad. And something I noticed which my dad would do. If he was in trouble, he was a very violent man, my dad. But if he was having an argument, I always noticed lots of blokes shout, and he would get quieter and quieter and quieter. And so I ended up doing things like his way. So I would stare at a child who just mucked about, and then say something like, "If you ever do that again," and I said, it was like magic. Don't shout, whisper.
Yeah.
And it really freaks them out because they're expecting whispering. I remember one kid at Sylvan.
It's like a pub fight or an argument. My dad used to say, a good card player never shows his hand. So you're not going to shout if they go, "Oh, in a minute, mate, I'm going to go over and do you. I'm going to you in a minute, you're going to get it." Yeah. People who's going to do it don't say nothing. They just go over and fucking lamp them.
Yeah, exactly. So I had doing this sort of whispering, and there was something I'd noticed, but I had actually told the kids about you whispering angrily. I said, some kid once said to me, "Well, yeah, where did you pick that up?" And I said, "Well, I pick it up every week in Tesco." And she said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Tesco put the sweets at the checkout, and almost every week you meet a mother saying, 'Don't you dare show me up in public,' because there's kids demanding sweets and the mother can't afford it. Whispering like mad, you will not show me up." I said, "I'm using the same thing." Children react quite positively in one way to being whispered at because it frightens them. If you shout,
it's unnerving.
They're used to that. Shouting, you can shrug it off.
Yeah.
You can shrug it off. But someone whispering sounds like they mean it. I didn't even teach her. I taught one of her friends, and she said, "You're really good." And I said, "You don't know that. I don't teach you." She said, "Yeah, but you're working class." I said, "What do you mean I'm working class?" I said, "Teachers are middle class." She said, "No, you're working class." I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "Well, when you were teaching us a cover lesson, you got a South London accent." I said, "Well, that's because where I was born. I was born at Elephant and Castle." And she said, "And you've never lost your accent." I said, "So what?" But after that, I thought, don't iron it out. If you're teaching kids like this, don't smooth out your accent, use it. And I did.
Because then you sound more approachable, Yeah,
and also more threatening if you get into that sort of mood.